Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to welcome you to the seminar. This is the challenges for the senior officer / candidate seminar, and I'm going to let Chuck and Rick introduce themselves. But just I'll introduce myself. So the three of us will be on the panel. So anyway, my name is Joe Fagan. I am. You might think I look like Dave Church. I am not Dave Church. I am not that I'm Dave's replacement. He is irreplaceable, but I took over. I've been at the Alumni Association for 7 years and worked in the engagement area until this December. And then Dave retired after 26 years. Dave Church is a 1967 grad from the Naval Academy, and he actually basically started the SAC program. So when he came on board, again, my background, I actually have a kind of unique background in that I 15 years active duty in the Marine Corps and had to get out, not because I got in trouble, because that's the first question people ask me after 15 years active duty. My wife got sick and ended up having to take care of her. So I did end up getting a reserve retirement, and we'll get it when I turn 60. But the opportunity opened up at the Alumni Association, and I went there. So that's kind of my background. Marine Corps out of the Naval Academy. So which is why I made the joke earlier, if you heard it, about Marines asking dumb questions. But anyway, so I'll turn it over to you, Chuck, first, and then
I heard you, Joe. I heard you. And this is a small, intimate crowd, and if you took offense at my earlier comments about not asking silly questions, don't ask silly questions.
Well, and I said Marines are typically the ones who do that.
I'll correct myself. There is no silly question, okay? And I will, and then I will spend enough time telling you about everything I did wrong in transition, so that you realize you are open and free to answer or ask any question. And my background, my name is Chuck Delaney. I'm with Lockheed Martin. I got a free t-shirt that I don't get to wear at in-person events lately, but look forward to doing that real soon. I am with Lockheed Martin 8 years. Prior to that, I was maybe still am a United States Marine, now retired after almost 30 years. And I did the normal things that the Marines that can't find their way out of the Marine Corps do, between fleet tours, independent duty, 2 recruiting tours, the joint staff, and closed out with teaching up at Army War, on the faculty of Army War, where I was a senior service rep, and from where I retired. And then I immediately joined Lockheed Martin. The day after my transition was in the last few months, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the great opportunity we have here to talk to people that are in a unique circumstance as a senior officer or even mid-grade, and the unique challenges that we have in transition, and then really open it up, because there's only 3 of us tonight on the panel. Really drive you all to ask those questions so that we can answer them. And the way I like to do things is to get very practical. Okay. Chuck Delaney, Marine 30 years. I was an Arty guy and then went comm because my resume would have translated to blow up things from far away, and instead it translated to some big words that I still don't know what they mean. And then we went to, and then with Lockheed as the military relations manager, what we do and what the military relations team, if you will, does, there's 3 of us now floating around Lockheed Martin. We advocate for military veterans. We advocate for military families. We first educate you about Lockheed Martin and about our lessons learned from transition as retired folk ourselves, or transitioned people. We then will take do all of the, we do that through military outreach, base visits, events like this, events in person, et cetera. Then we introduce you to our process at Lockheed Martin, the programs that Lockheed Martin has for military veterans and our partners that we partner with to exercise those programs. And then we'll take and get some forced introductions for you, because probably the hardest thing to do breaking into corporate America is to get your resume read, especially when you're applying online. And we try to do that for you. Get you up on a bike with some training wheels if you need them, but then send you on your own and not hold your hand through the whole process, but help where we could. Okay, and I love it. 8 years, and it hasn't gotten boring yet. But I'll introduce you to people or one person that I definitely look up to. That's Rick White, to my virtual left. And let him introduce himself before we get started with the questions.
Chuck, thanks. Thanks to SAC and also to Lockheed Martin for putting this on. I really appreciate having the ability to talk here and do that. My name is Rick White. I'm a West Point 1984 graduate. Currently, I'm an executive director at JP Morgan Chase. My job right now is I'm the head of the Know Your Customer function for our commercial banks middle market. So we support about 1,000 bankers across the country and a few internationally, and looking at the anti-money laundering risk of the clients that we have within the commercial bank. Prior to this, I was an armor officer and a foreign area officer. I served 28 years on active duty, transitioned more to the foreign area officer role, spent a lot of time in South Asia. In fact, 10 years of my active duty time were spent in India. My final role was as senior defense official, defense attaché in New Delhi, India. And then I retired in 2012, got out and said, I'm going to start my own consulting company, because we sold a lot of airplanes in India and people want that experience. But at the same time, sequestration came along. It just didn't work out quite as well. So I bounced around and did that for a few years. I went back to India and worked in a joint venture in India for a US defense company and a big Indian conglomerate, a $16 billion Indian company, and worked in that until they determined it was a little bit expensive to keep an expat overseas. So came back and really had to find something that I could do more full time. And I came to SAC in DC 5 years ago, 5 years ago this month. And and my key story that I tell here is the last place of the day I went to was JP Morgan Chase, and gave them a copy of my resume. And they asked me, what do you know about AML KYC? And I'm like, what in the heck is AML KYC? It's anti-money laundering, know your customer. And we did interviews on site there at the time. And 6 weeks later, I was in New York City leading an organization that I had people in New York, had people in Atlanta. And so I covered the Northeast and Southeast part of the US for what we were doing at the time. A couple key things that I always like to point out is I always thought I'd be doing defense work, working for Chuck, working for, the Raytheons, the Boeings, the Lockheeds of the world. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a finance degree, but, I still got hired by JP Morgan Chase because they needed the skills that I had. And I'll give you a view of a hiring manager. Somebody went through that, but also the view of what a hiring manager goes through and what a hiring manager looks for, at least from my experience and from what I've done. And I think you'll find that Joe, Chuck, and I, we've done this a few times, and we'll give you our honest answers. And, please don't go back and repeat that Rick White of JP Morgan said this, but we will give you our best honest answers and what we've learned and what we've gone through with this experience and what we've learned from other people sitting on this panel over the time. So Yeah, I tried to put my email out there. I'm not sure if it went or not, but my email hopefully is in the chat if you need to get a hold of me later on. So that's my story.
Your email's out there, Rick.
Okay.
So your email's in the chat. Just a bit of just housekeeping. So the chat, we're going to try and keep for like housekeeping items like email addresses, or if there's a problem with audio and you want to say something there. But the Q&A part, just when you guys have questions, please just throw them in the Q&A and we'll kind of go through them. So you have the two options down there, the Q&A part and the chat. And then it looks like there's a question in there now. And then this webinar is being recorded, so you can go back to it, refer to it later. All right.
I see TV's question on there. He asked us if we had a choice to retire at 20 years or 30 years. As we look back on it, what would you do? And that's a good question. I mean, I think when I got out, I got more of a senior role I got more of a senior role when I came out because I had different experiences but by that point. But would I have more upward mobility over the long run if I would have gotten out at 20 years, maybe starting in a more junior role? That's possible. I think you got to look at what you're doing. I always said I would get out when I wasn't having fun, and I liked the opportunity to work overseas. I was the defense attaché in Kabul for a year as well, working out of the embassy there. I thought the work we did in India was really good, but I think by the end of that tour, I got offered some other roles. Got offered to go to Just Mag Phil, to go back to Hawaii and do that. But I was really at that point ready to come out and work in the civilian world. So I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer to that at all. Chuck and Joe, your thoughts?
I'll say I think it's situational based. If the opportunities are more appealing, whatever your monitor or detailer says is a no-go for you next run, that may make the decision. What the economy looks like on the outside, because it's contrarian to what the military is doing as far as retention. But I don't regret the time I was in. I could have stayed in longer. I came up just short of 30 years, 29. But I physically I couldn't, and I made that decision based on that, to make room for somebody that was obviously much younger and smarter than I was to pick up where I left. I didn't do it smartly. I retired in the teeth of sequestration, 2013, where people were getting laid off left and right, and salaries were being cut, etc. And so, in hindsight, would I've scaled or appreciated the environment, and looked out to the job market, etc. more so? Yes. But I threw my hook in the water and got a good number of bites. Got a job offer that I couldn't get out of the Marine Corps fast enough on, and then lived in reality, because after that one passed, then it was 3 months of resume building and submission, and contact rebuilding, etc., to try and find the right opportunity. And every single situation is different. But if you're going to do it, you feet first and dive in wholeheartedly, and don't just start applying. Do all the work ahead of time, 1 year out, to prepare yourself, to prepare your family, to best position yourself with various certifications or some reschooling and updates to your background. And Joe, you're transfer. What's that?
I was going to say, I think the one thing I would do different, I would not retire straight from overseas, especially a remote assignment like India, I would have came back to the States and
Right.
used the year to really get my feet on the ground and understand what I was doing. I've been overseas for 7 years in India and Afghanistan, and I would not do that again.
All right, so Chuck, you were going to say something to me?
Well, and to you, well, you transitioned, and what you do now in your role in the nonprofit world is, I'd say, slightly different than how I transitioned and how Rick transitioned.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, you know, my transition was, I transitioned because it was kind of a need to do something. And I was fortunate, you know, because I was commuting from Annapolis. I actually was living in Annapolis and commuting to Bethesda every day. I was working at the Naval Hospital in Bethesda. And then also I had a unit, I had a group at Walter Reed, as well as several other hospitals. But so mine was a need to be, I had a newborn child, and you know, my wife had just passed away. So a lot of times stuff like this happens by happenstance. But to answer your question, DB, it was just, you know, the 20 to 30 year mark. I was probably looking at, you know, the 20-year mark, and then I was going to get out. I love the Marine Corps, but I looked at it as, you know, get the 20-year mark and then do something. And I was also, you know, part of my 20-year mark was kind of getting tired of the deployments to the Middle East. So you know, a lot of it has to do with timing and stuff. And so, you know, that's kind of what I would say with that. And as far as, you know, the nonprofit stuff, yeah, it's the nonprofit is definitely different than I think, you know, either Rick or Chuck would say in the corporate world. It's one, you know, just to be fair, I do not have a retirement yet, because, you know, I won't collect it till age 60. But I, so, and the not-for-profit world tends to not be there, you know, you do a lot of it because, and I think anybody that's Service Academy would probably answer it the same way. You do it for the love of your institution. And that's kind of where I'm doing it. And same with almost any not-for-profit, you do it for, you know, the love of that cause. Because the salaries are not, typically they're not as high in not-for-profits. Unless you're going to be a CEO of like Goodwill or something.
Okay, I think if we structure this a bit, there would be value. I think if I see questions coming in, I want to jump on these questions, but to talk to healthcare compensation, benefits packages, et cetera, before we ever get to how do I get my name on the interview slate, I think we're putting a little, you know, cart before the horse kind of thing. And I want to step all the way back to that my first comment about 1 year. When you are, you know, anybody that, I can't see you raise your hands in the audience now, but if you're, you know, 1 or 2 years out from being available, there's no reason for you to apply to specific jobs. Is there a reason to engage with employers? Yes. To learn about them, you know, those famous informational interviews. Just ask the question on email or in a phone call. And if there's those kind of things, looking at if you have an engineering degree, when's the last time you used any of those tools if you're going to be applying to an engineering job, and maybe you want to do a little refresh, and rather than doing a you know, executive based engineering management you know, weekend degree, look at some certifications to exercise that technical bit, because companies will look for that before they look for what they often look, you know, what we believe we are, which is, you know, we can manage and lead anything. as a senior officer. It's not, there's one of those for every 12 people that are on a program team, and there's just one general manager, general or principal to it, but everybody else gets well compensated and plays a vital role. And it's more subject, matter expert. It's more individual contributors, and it's more about exercising the skills that take you all the way back, possibly to your schooling and education, or your technical prowess with regard to the weapon systems when it comes to Lockheed, or how you can exercise inside of the financial network with just your soft skills and your comm skills and how they translate. If you don't start with your self-evaluation, and if you don't sit down with those people that matter in your decision matrix and say what's important, whether it be location or job satisfaction or money, I'd say you started off on the wrong foot. And I welcome either one of you two gentlemen to ask, to dive in on that one. But I'd say that's where you have to start, and then you progress towards researching the industries and the specific companies that you'd be interested in, and then digging a little deeper into those, trying to find personal connections where you can build your wealth of knowledge, not only in the job opportunities and what they do and what the culture is like, but how you apply the practical stuff that matters, because you'll get really frustrated when you're applying online. Then in the process, once you get the interview, that's when the important conversations are on the way to the interview. So you're inside that recruiting cycle, the hiring cycle. That's when you start talking about, what does compensation look like? What does, am I going to make a little and have a bigger title? Am I going to be a consultant with a 1099 and have to pay my own benefits into my own benefits, or is it my compensation package going to be all inclusive? Those are the kind of conversations you want to have inside that. But if you educate yourself about the industries, and you educate yourself about the organizations and the companies that you're looking at, and you build your target list just like you would when you were, at war college or wherever, or at work, then you'd be doing yourself a service.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point, Chuck, on the importance of having those conversations and knowing where you want to be. When I took this role for the first time, I knew that we had a son that was a junior in high school, and we weren't going to move away from Tampa at that point. However, we kind of said if the right job and the right opportunity comes around, we would be able, to have, to have an apartment someplace and maybe commute back on the weekends, every other weekend, to be able to do that. But I wanted to be within flying distance of someplace to get back and forth from Tampa. The opportunity that came up for me happened to be in New York City. And so, we were comfortable with that. We got the apartment over there. We made the best of having an apartment in New York City and a house still in Tampa. And it kept me sane during a lot of long winters, coming back down here to Tampa and being able to get out there. But that's not a decision for everybody. And it kind of depends on where you were. A little bit of it, I think, if you are retiring, that gives you some advantages you don't have otherwise. You do have a pension there. You do have the health care there. So it does give you some options you may not have otherwise. Some people may want to live in a very specific spot. I mean, if you tell me that you want to work for JP Morgan, you live in Washington, D.C., I'll tell you, we don't have a lot of jobs right there. Mm-hmm. So, but we do. If you want to live in Columbus, Ohio, we've got a lot there. We've got Phoenix, we got Tampa, we have Dallas, we have Chicago. So, it just all depends. If you want to live in a place, you need to make that decision. Now, I think another thing that you need to look at, and I've kind of hinted around at this, are you comfortable going into an individual contributor role instead of being a people manager? You're going to find there's a lot more opportunities for individual contributors, and they can lead to those management jobs. But the management jobs are a lot fewer and harder to get to, and harder to be able to move in. So you probably have to make some comfort with being an individual contributor for a while. And maybe they may bring you into a company to be a project manager or program manager, and that'll give you a year or so to figure out where the right place to move in there. And if you're comfortable doing that, that might be someplace to consider. If it's the right location, the right industry, if the culture you feel right is the right fit for you.
Yeah. People are posting questions about healthcare and, retiring versus it's a trade-off. I mean, that's what it is. You have the potential to make a lot of money on the outside. Your income growth rate is a fixed rate while you're in uniform. But you will realize as you come out of uniform, when you assess your income to include the tax benefits, it wasn't a bad paycheck. And if I can't complain. You retire as an 06 and it's you can live off of it. You quickly realize when you work for a big company that your taxes quadruple, and you really have to pay attention to your finances for a different reason. Yes, there are the demands of college. There are and those things are addressable. You have this window of opportunity where you want to make as much as you can for a period of time, so that maybe if you stop working, you can enjoy it for a little while. And I'm getting there. I mean, I live at the beach, so those are the kind of things that are an advantage when you retire. The flex, of I've got to hunker down and find a job, but if you can cover all the basics, mortgage, etc., and you're going to stay in place because that retirement check covers it or eats away at the bills at a good clip, you're in a better position. But for anybody, it's preparation really matters, and it doesn't start with showing up here saying, what kind of jobs do you have for me? It doesn't start at going to career fairs or sending arbitrary emails to someone you don't know saying, I'd like to have coffee with you. It starts with doing your homework and doing the research and coming in with questions that are real. And one of those questions for a senior officer would be, where do you think I fit? As Rick said, not everybody's going to step. You run an organization of 1,200 people. Not everybody's going to step into the civilian world, and every aspect of their skills, experience, education translate into that company and the job you're going to fill at that company, or the jobs that are available at that given company or the given location where you want to end up. So it's a matter of identifying your skills and your interests and applying those. And sometimes it means taking a step back from an income perspective and surveying the landscape, and then saying, if I make my point of entry here instead of here, I can arrive here and fairly quickly. There's not lockstep. It's not lockstep. Like, I won't come in zone for 2 more years. Until then, I'm going to get a 2.1% raise. It is you make a lot more money when you're in the civilian world. Maybe not in the nonprofit, but in corporate America. It's just a matter of not spending too much time trying to find what you think is a perfect fit, and just accepting the fact that what is the perfect fit you probably are not aware of, and there are some people that have gone before you and they might be able to help you answer that question, or you can ask someone else.
I see a lot of questions on the technical piece, and to be able to do that, the certifications piece. I have a PMP. I got that after I retired. I used through the Syracuse program, the IVMF program, which JP Morgan just happens to pay for it, but they don't recruit out of that pool because they can't, because laws. But if you're looking for something, I think the PMP usually works out pretty well. I found it helped me give myself another tool that I could use to think and process, and I could explain things going through interviews. Whether it's a PMP role or not, here's a way you can think and break down. So it was just another tool that I had out there, but I didn't move into a program management job. I think that the question on hard skills, the role that I moved into, I would not tell you that I am still not an expert on the anti-money laundering stuff. I've got a lot of people that work for me. I've got matrix teams that are in Singapore, Warsaw, Buenos Aires, and in India, and they're really the experts. So people, if they're hiring you after 20 years, after 25 years, after 30 years, they're probably not looking for you to be the exact expert in that. They're looking for that leadership skill. They're looking for your ability to solve problems, your ability to lead, to develop that and learn it. That you're going to get a chance to learn. They're not going to say, oh, you must be the AML expert that is out there right now. I don't have a cyber background. If you have a cyber background and you've got a technical background in that, you're probably very hireable right now. But in a large part of corporate America, you won't have you won't have pharmaceutical expertise. But it doesn't mean that everybody has to be a chemist to work in a big pharma company. The same thing in finance. You all don't have to have a finance degree or an MBA to work in a large bank to do that. But Chuck, you usually have some really good hints on what this means, though, for your military, the defense jobs, and some of the technical pieces.
So I spent my time in the Marine Corps, and I did the recruiting thing in good times and in challenging times, but I enjoyed it. So I work with all the recruiting teams now across Lockheed Martin in this advocacy role that I have, and it's a relationship management. It is a program management, but it's an outreach, and it's almost like a business development role. Okay. You defining yourself and saying what you come in as. I went out and got my CompTIA certifications because I thought I had to be marketable. When I followed, with Rick, and I did IVMF, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University, and this, and sponsors and great programs, and they come in under the Skills Bridge program that allow you and help you in transition. But that I got my HR certs. Why? Because I was playing in the HR world, and I wanted to have some creds with my contemporaries. I'd never played in HR other than asking S1 what this was, or performance evaluations, whatever the case may be. So to that end, it matters. It's a question, some of the questions are about if I was in organizational leadership for 20 plus years, should I not expect that role, or should I not apply to that role coming into a company? Well, it depends on what you did and what organizations you led. It depends on the functional area. Okay, it depends on the industry. Finance, as Rick said, it's a lot of interpersonal skills and comm skills that would apply there. But when it comes to Lockheed Martin, if you were an armor officer or you were an artillery officer and you know what MLRS is, that weapon system, well, you probably could find a role at Lockheed Martin. Or if you flew an F-35 or an F-16 or a C-130 or a Sikorsky helicopter, you'd probably be able to find a role you know, and the various companies that either build such systems, support such systems, et cetera. If you spend time in the, you know, on the joint staff and the Pentagon, at the service headquarters, et cetera, you're in a position from an experience perspective and from a connection perspective to translate those relationships into your next career. But then it becomes doing the homework. I can't tell you the number of people that I've talked with, and they'll say, "What should I apply to?" I applied to this. Shouldn't apply to that. And I then will ask them to open up the job posting that they looked at, and Lockheed Martin has 2,800 right now. Okay, ask them to open it up, and I just read down through the narrative, through the basic qualifications, plus the desired skills, and I just tick things off. It's, you know, you are working in this functional area of sustainment support for the F-35. Have you ever flown an F-35? Have you ever maintained an F-35? Have you ever planned for an F-35? Have you ever seen an F-35? When all the answers to that are no, you're probably not the best candidate for that particular job. If job descriptions, and this is where it comes, we just have to be true to ourselves and honest with ourselves, because you get out of service, and especially as a senior officer, you have a lot of portable skills, a lot of translatable skills, a lot of skills that, you know, corporate America is very interested in. But it's a matter of you assessing your own experience, you being honest with yourself and admitting that probably the individual who is at Lockheed Martin, who has been in the defense industry, maybe with a competitor for the last 3 years, may be more competitive, and you know they applied, okay, may be more competitive than I am when proprietary information is posted in a job, you know, when the job posting calls for an understanding of processes and policies of Lockheed Martin. That's probably someone that's been in industry before would get that first. Would I stop you from applying? No, but realize that that's your Achilles when it comes to that particular job. Okay. If it calls for and speaks to weapon systems or capabilities that you're very familiar with because you worked in those spaces, there's your strength, and that's what you play up, and that's what you address, you know, and you front load in your resume and in your cover letter when you do them and in your presentations. Those kind of things are all you need. When it comes to different companies structure their employees differently. For Lockheed Martin, I liken it to the military ranks. It's a level 1 for salaried employees. You have hourly, you have internships, et cetera. But for salaried employees, which most all will fit in here, your level 1s and your experience level of 4-year and above college is entry level associates, less than 5 years, 4 years and above, less than 2 years experience coming out of school. Okay, so it's for those that maybe didn't commission or are doing 1 tour and getting out. Level 2s, and it's a 1 through 7, and posted on our website, directors are a level 7. Do you step into, depends on what it is, functional area of business development, maybe a director. But when you get to the level 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s, okay, and the job description calls for 7 to 12 years, a level 4, and within a particular in industry, in a particularly functional area, and you don't have that 7 to 12 years as you dissect your resume because you went to various B billets, et cetera, then you have to mitigate that or demonstrate a strength on paper and in your conversations with the employment staff that will overcome, because those are identified weaknesses, and why wouldn't you want to address them and mitigate any potential risk of not getting picked before it ever happened when you know it.
Yeah, let me maybe address a couple of them that I see in here that you talked about. And I think Chuck's talked about it. And I say one of the things when you come Friday and you come into the job fair, we as military have a tendency, because we've gone through most of our military career, of somebody telling us where we're going next. The detailer told you, the branch told you where you were going for your next assignment to be able to get there. It doesn't work that way in the corporate world. And people at SAC are pretty good. They can handle that question of kind of what type of jobs do you have me? Where do you think I might fit? But if you're going to a regular civilian job fair, they expect you to know what job you want to do. And I think that's valuable, even at SAC, is if you have a list, and when I went through, I kind of made my top tier, my middle tier, and ones I probably just would not work out for me. But for the top ones, I looked through there and saw if there were jobs that I might want to apply for and I was interested in. And I had a resume available for that job and a copy of the job description. So I could go to the booth and say, I applied for this job, and the right recruiter may not be there, the hiring manager might be there, but it allows you to have a conversation about something you think you might be a good fit for. You know what? You may not be, but at least you've had a conversation. You've thought about it, and you've discussed why you think you might be able to work in that job. Then I think as you go forward and you get a very specific role that you've applied for, you've gotten into the interview process, think about how you do that job. Bring that into the interview process. And how can you find out a little bit more about it? There's the ways to look at the various websites, but I think the Academy group is very good. And you can look on LinkedIn. Do you know anybody that works there? Do you know anybody from one of the academies? And I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, I'm a Naval Academy graduate. I saw this. I see you're also a graduate. Can you help me understand, is this kind of the right role or not? And in some places, it gives the ability, I've got the ability to reach out. I can see who the hiring manager is, talk to them a little bit more. I can pass it on to our military recruiters, or actually to the recruiter, for being able to do that. So that's the type of dialogue. But as Chuck said, let's be specific about it. Don't just call me and say, hey, Rick, I know you've got 260,000 jobs at JP Morgan. Where would I fit in good? Have more of a thought and make it easier for us to help you out. Another thing I like to point out is most of us have military recruiters. JP Morgan Chase, our people are really good. They sit with the actual recruiters that are hiring for positions, and they try to head you into that position. And a lot of the companies you deal with here have the military recruiting teams. They're a great asset. When you get into the hiring process, the recruiter can be your friend. If you're moving through the interviews, that recruiter has invested some time in you, invested in getting you to the right people to be able to do that. They can answer questions for you sometimes. Say, hey, my next interview is with Rick White. What's his role? Well, what does he do? How does he think? They can let you know if you're on the right track or if you're on the wrong track. They can give you email addresses to send thank you notes, or they can be that contact. So as you get into the hiring process, use your recruiter and reach out to them more, and that is very helpful.
Listen, I'd like to offer the down and dirty on the hiring process and applicant tracking systems. It is okay. 2,900. 7 million jobs that I don't know, Rick, I don't know how many jobs got posted, but applicant tracking systems, the way you get a job today is you apply online. Every company will say it because that's their tracking process. That's how they bring you into the fold. Okay, that's how they process you to do initial screening, etc. When with regard to Lockheed Martin and defense contractors, it's a must, because we can't target certain demographics. There are compliance requirements that come out of the Office of Federal Contracting Compliance that say you can't target a demographic. Veterans are a protected, a protected class. So handling your resume and who you can talk to about what, potential conflicts of interest as a government employee, all those things you can see as a hindrance from your perspective, but they're a necessity from the corporate perspective to stay, within the regulatory community and to stay within the law. But every applicant tracking system, you go up, I would say you can find a job on a third-party website, but find that company, go to their website and apply there. And it's, in most cases, it's a two-step process, not unlike USA Jobs, if you have experience there. It is a process of you building a profile with a master resume. And people will say, well, what's my master resume? It's a focus on the last 10 years, and then including all those things that may be pertinent after the last 10 years. But if you have progressive advancement in the last 10 years, get the detail for that. Spend the time with the detail, the P&L, the numbers that matter, not just the nebulous, fancy, nice words like team player and dedicated professional, kind of soft terms. It is that, and then it's upfront for the particular job. It's tailoring it to a job. If you start off with a brief summary of who you are, okay, not what you want, not your objective, because you're applying to a job, so that's a given, but what you're about in 50 words or less. If you take your core competencies and put them up front and highlight them, be it your TS clearance, your certifications, your your education, just up quick to make note of it, and then education is going to be at the tail end of your resume. Then you walk the dog through, not in the fashion of a performance evaluation, ticking things off, but telling a story in the STAR method that says, here's the situation I was in for this job. This is, these were the tasks at hand. This is the activity, and this was the results. That STAR thing. There's some value in various, seminar classes and resume classes that they give in transition. And there's some great companies and some great nonprofits that will help you in development and developing your resume and putting more eyes on it. They're prolific when it comes to veteran support. Okay, breaking the squelch is getting past that first person. Okay, most recruiters are not military savvy. Most of the United States is not military savvy. Part of my job as a military relations manager is not only the outreach to the and managing programs like this for Lockheed Martin, but it's also educating our recruiting force, because in most cases they are, and the senior recruiters know military through osmosis because they've had the experience. But I talk with recruiters all the time. They'll ask me what this means. Someone just while we were on this phone call asked me what the Naval Warfare Center Aeronautics Division was. Okay, those are the kind of things I answer internally, because that is a talent acquisition professional that knows recruiting but doesn't know military, doesn't know what you did as a CO. And being a CO doesn't mean you're the CEO. It means you were a CO. Okay, they don't know the lingo, but they know if they have it in a job posting, your resume should have it. I've seen so many pilots civilianize their resume and not include what they flew. Well, if you're talking to a company that builds airplanes, it's probably a good idea to mention that I fly C-130s. It would really be a good idea. Those kind of things. So it's summary, core competencies, the highlights, into the detail, and it's reverse chronology, and then closing out with education and certifications, and stating your certifications in detail, currency, et cetera, even though you bulletize them in your key competencies. The focus should be, when you upload your master resume, it's everything you did. It could be 3 pages. Okay, it's a word search game when you're in that database. And the database for Lockheed Martin is about 6 million strong. And when you apply to a job, you're applying to one specific job, and it's very job centric. And the only person that sees you, unless I go in there and look, or someone that has, view rights across all of the all of the applicant tracking system, is that recruiter. Until that recruiter releases you because they saw enough yes answers to the requirements, the hiring manager won't see that resume. That's, in some instances, you have my email address, you send me a job that you applied to, and I give you feedback. And then you send me the job ID number, and I would say, you're aiming high, you're aiming low. This is a good fit. I see you applied. I send a note to the hiring team. Okay, those kind of things. That's the kind of homework first, but know that it is not applicant centric, it's job centric. So you have to stay active in the process, and you have to stay, I'll say aggressive. You have to stay very proactive in it. You have to stay professional, but you also have to be patient, because recruiters just do that all day long, and they usually have anywhere from 20 to 80 jobs to fill at any given time. And they usually have several hundred people applying to every single job. So keywords will get you noticed, and that thins the crowd for them to read in detail. But it is answering all in context, answering all the needs of that job post. And if you can't without lying, don't apply to that job.
Just if I could just kind of piggyback on what Rick and Chuck said. So yeah, Chuck is exactly right. And just what I've seen in talking with other companies and stuff, it is, it's kind of like, Chuck, you mentioned USA Jobs, and they do use a scanner to pull keywords and stuff. So, there's that. And so it is, it's a learning process, and, that is a good way. I would say one other thing, and Rick mentioned this, and I just want to reiterate it. It's the military recruiting teams that are at these companies, especially like at this job fair, they want to work with veterans. And so it to me, seeing, because I've seen the program over the last 7 years, it's kind of refreshing. They are more active in your careers and being involved with you. And I've been on several of these webinars this week where, the person in the military on the military recruiting team has said, hey, if you're having issues, get your resume to me and I'll farm it out to other people. So use those resources. And Rick had mentioned also the career programs offices at the service academies. All 5 service academies have them. So take advantage of them as well.
Yeah, I think on the resume, and something that Chuck and I know came back, if people don't understand and you get it into there, for example, I get a lot of 05, 06, 07 type resumes that say, hey, can you take a look at this? What do you think? What did this person do to be able to do that? I'm very big on not writing your resume like a civilian resume, as Chuck said. I don't want to see that you're a CEO of anything. If you're a commander, tell me you commanded something. Maybe you're not going to put that you were the G3, but you could put operations officer for a division. Then you can put in how many people you're responsible for. How much money were you responsible for? The type of things you did. That shows the complexity of your job. And those are the important things I think that we look for.
Yeah, be quantitative. That's what Rick's getting at is you've got to make that. And I think Chuck laid it out really well in how he talked about that master resume, is because, and a couple of people have asked that. They've said, how do you talk about, the last, 30 years or 20 years, And, like you said, it obviously you might go back beyond 10 years if something you did beyond 10 years is specifically related to this job that you're applying for. But the roadmap that Chuck set out for you is really good. Trying to gather 20/30 years of military experience into a couple page document.
I saw the one note down there, what gets somebody, we've seen somebody get fired early on, or what senior level mistakes. I've seen what doesn't get people hired. And I think a very, you're a group that's already vetted. You're all military academy graduates. That already has vetted you in many ways. But as you approach this into senior levels, you also have to come with it of being humble, and recognize, ask questions to do that. The people that I've seen that have not done well, that have came in and said, I'm going to fix this for you. I'm going to fix this for you. What do you need me to do to come in and fix for you? In most cases, we aren't hiring people to fix. That might be something very good for a family-owned manufacturing business in a small city or something, and they need people like that, and that's it. But if you're going into a big company, you're not going to turn that company around and all of a sudden be able to do that. And it's okay to be humble. Your resume speaks for you. You can talk with confidence about what you've done. You can talk about your competence, and it comes out really well. But there needs to be a little bit of humble to it as well. And when you get there, ask questions. You will find out you're being asked to make decisions quicker than you want to in some cases, but ask questions as you go along. Find out what works, what doesn't. And I think that makes a big difference in the success of somebody that's coming out and getting into their first corporate job.
Yeah, I think it's really important that I go back to spending time with job postings and descriptions, and how you answer. It's all about answering those questions in your resume, because that's what presents you. You're a piece of paper in a virtual world, and that recruiter is just looking just for the answers to the needs demonstrated in the job post. If a job posting comes out and it has acronyms that you don't know, you could either set aside that job posting or Google them. In the instance I sit, in recruiting, in the talent acquisition organization of Lockheed Martin, and one of the acronyms that was on my job post was ATS. No idea what ATS was. Okay. But you Google it, and it's applicant tracking system, and it's, the MRISs, it's the information systems that are, tied to HR. And I had used them numerous times, and we all do through our military career, but not knowing the acronym and addressing it to answer that question, I wouldn't have landed in the interview. Okay. The other things that people are, I see a number of questions about, leadership versus individual contributor. I go back to level 1 to level 7. Lockheed Martin posts all jobs. Very few jobs that are seen post internally. It doesn't really happen. There's legal aspects to it, etc. But they post all jobs up through director, leader, or individual contributor. When you are a level 5 manager, that is the same level as a senior staff individual contributor. So if you see a job that says, engineer analyst senior staff, or engineer project manager, the project manager may have people tied to it, and it may speak to the leadership role and the people management role more so than the leadership role that we're familiar with. But the level's the same, and usually the pay scale is comparable, because pay scale is dictated not only by functional area and technical things, but level primarily. Okay, that's the primary aspect. So you can be making that same amount. And when I talk to people and I get them introduced to Lockheed Martin, that's part of my role too, is get you generally introduced to all of Lockheed Martin. People are asking about how they break out. You're in there applying to individual jobs, trying to get individually noticed. I'll take your resume, ask you for a lot of more information, and then blast you out to all of Lockheed Martin as this is a candidate. Once you've expressed interest, I can legally do it. This is a candidate that is looking for opportunities at Lockheed Martin. Here's his or her background, experience, clearance, degree, and date availability and geographic location interest. Boom, it goes out there. Okay. If a recruiter or hiring manager sees and has interest in you as an individual, they pull you. But the more, more successful route is to be refining your resume, applying, finding those right fits for you as an individual, and targeting those jobs with a tailored resume. And it's being persistent in that process that lands you the job. And I literally had 3 resumes. I had my IT one, I had my network systems management type one that got me the job that I was onboarding with in my last month on active duty when Lockheed finally called. Lockheed had the interest in the recruiting job. And then I had my roll up, that we talked about earlier, that covered all those things that make Marines annoying to other service members. Talking about the Marine Corps ethos and general management and leadership, et cetera. Okay, so all that applies. People had some questions about benefits, healthcare, et cetera. It all depends on the company, and talk to that, what Joe said, talk to that recruiter, because there are 2 people that have a vested interest in you getting a job or that job being filled. It's the recruiter and you. And they want the right person. So if you answer the question that's not a right fit, if you're applying for a job and you're 9 months from being available, that recruiter has to fill the job in 3 months. As soon as you say that, they move on to the next person. If you're applying and you want X dollars and their budget only allows for Y dollars, they'll move on to the next person because they have to find the right fit. Okay, they have to, within their, within the scope of their job definitions, their budgets, et cetera. But being a W-2 employee versus a 1099 consultant is a huge difference. I retired, I used TRICARE Prime. It's good. Lockheed Martin's medical insurance is good, but I'd have to pay for it, right? Okay, or pay my portion. But I use Lockheed's dental and eyes. And when I walked in, they had Delta Dental, and I had Delta Dental when I got out of the military. When I walked into my same dentist and said, right after retiring, and I was on Delta Dental, they looked me up. I was getting a root canal or something. I don't know what it was, but it was, it's fairly expensive. And at first she saw me as military, and it was like going to be a copay of $900. And I said, no, I transitioned. It's still Delta Dental, Lockheed Martin. And she said, well, that, I saved $740 because Lockheed Martin had a different program and a different package than, the military did. So talk to that recruiter about all those benefits. They'll put them out there. If it's a sell point for them, for companies, for big companies, a lot of big companies it is, they'll want to tell you about it. And it's total package, total compensation that matters.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Look at things, the employee stock option programs, how much your matching is in your 401k. All of those are things that we aren't very good. And you've got limited windows to make those selections a lot of times when you come in. So make sure that you're paying attention to that and read that stuff up front and know what's available to you. In some places it won't be able, for us, we don't do 401k matching until after the first year. And so, look at that and you can weigh all of those as you go through. And I'm like Chuck, I tried to use our insurance one year and I went back to TRICARE Prime for my retirement. TRICARE Prime has worked out really well for myself and for my family, at least. Yeah. I'll be glad when we do this in person again. I mean, right now I feel it's kind of like it's Chuck and Joe and I talking at you all, and it really works out well when we have the give and take. But I appreciate the questions that have came in there as we try to parse through those.
People asking if their sights are set too high job wise. Again, I go back to just if you have a friend in the business, and you're trying to figure out job titles, etc., or roles, just tell them what you want to make. They'll tell you the level job, and they'll give you some keywords and language to look for in those job posts that will help you find the right job. Okay, that's because when it comes down to it, some people want quality of life, some people want working conditions, whatever. I just want to buy a boat. Or whatever it is. Just make your decisions on what's important to you, and then act accordingly. In a professional manner. I have a boat, by the way.
Me too.
Fits in my tub.
The other thing is that we talk about often is don't get caught up on titles. For example, in the finance market, I'm an executive director and vice presidents work for me. There may be other places where only a vice president is the very senior part. So be careful and watch out around that. And, I ask about responsibilities, and you can ask somebody that's in the company really, what is this role? What's it equivalent to be able to do that? And that will help you out as you go through it as well.
Rick, to follow up on that question, is it right to say that, or is it correct to say it's kind of industry specific? Like I know in the not-for-profit world, they do have, and if you come from a military background, it's kind of like learning acronyms. It's foreign to you, but the not-for-profit world has, associate director is actually above assistant director, but that's pretty much standard across the not-for-profit world. So, I'm wondering if, in the defense industry, for you, Chuck, and then for you, Rick, in the money world, if it's kind of, just so it gives some kind of benchmark to look at if they're looking in a specific industry.
I mean, for us, I think in the financial world, it's pretty common that managing director is kind of your GO level role. Your executive director is kind of your very senior, it's that 06, 07 type position as an executive director, then the vice presidents. They're a lot flatter organizations than what we might find in the military to be able to do that. And you shouldn't depend on getting a promotion every 3 years. You may be an executive director for a long time. You may not make managing director, but that's not bad. You can move. There's varying levels of responsibility within that. But I would say across it, it's fairly consistent. I mean, if you go and look at Wells or you look at Bank of America or something, you're going to find pretty much consistency in that type of stuff.
So there used to be a lot more industry standard when it came to job titles with us. They've gotten away from it because some of it was just archaic. They would call I call them recruiter, but they're called talent acquisition professionals. When I first joined Lockheed Martin, they were called employment representative staff, and I wasn't sure what that meant. You couldn't figure it out without reading the whole job description to say, wow, that's a recruiter. But not having that language, not using the language of the organization in your resume, when you tailor that resume to the job, will hurt you because you won't come up with a keyword search. So I changed recruiting is it because I was a recruiting commander? I changed recruiting to talent acquisition professional on my resume. And that mattered to get me into that seat, that kind of thing. What kind of timeline are we looking at, Joe?
About 2 minutes.
Okay.
We can go a little bit over if people have questions.
Yeah, I can close out. You guys, you have the emails, the email addresses. If you connected me on LinkedIn, sooner or later I get to it. But I'd say my queue is about 500. I get 50 requests a day for people to connect to me on LinkedIn. So that to answer that question, am I there? Yes. But email me. Will it take me a few days, several days this week, especially when I have 4 different events, three events in a panel, and I'll be meeting, several hundred people. Yes, but I will get back to you and sending your resume to me and saying, I'm looking at this job. I'd give you some feedback and I'd do and then I'd recommend some things for you to do to get yourself situated with Lockheed Martin. Okay. At least to get you started. And that's what we'll do. And then it's, I'll tell you, is it luck? Fate, luck, grace, call it what you will. It's a great environment. It's a great market right now for job seekers, and it's going to get better over the course of the next 6 months to a year. So I envy anybody that's out, breaking out of uniform this year, in the coming year, because I still consider myself lucky that I landed at Lockheed. Swore I'd never go back to DC, and ended up like 1,000 meters from the Pentagon. But that's the only downside. The only downside, my office is there, and I live here. All right. That's my spiel, and I wish everybody luck. Joe?
Yeah, good luck. Use Friday to your advantage. Use all these seminars to help you out, and it'll be a good experience. And like Chuck said, the hiring's really picking up right now. It's a good time to be out there. So, Chuck, thanks again for doing this. Joe, thanks for leading us through this. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Thank you, guys. And I think, just to emphasize what Rick and Chuck both said, we do look forward to doing this back in person. It changes a lot. So somebody had asked for the email addresses. I just posted all of them back into the chat. So you guys should have them in the chat now. Right, all 3 of them right back to back. But anyway, Rick and Chuck, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to do this. We really appreciate it. And good luck to everybody with the rest of this week, and then on Friday.
See you Friday.
Hey, take care.
See you guys.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Zach.